Hi, my name is James, and today we're going to take a look at how to create your graphic design history journal from start to finish using Adobe InDesign. There's four different sections we need to cover so that you can make sure you end up with a good journal. The first one is going to be searching for content. We need to make sure that you find high quality images so that you can have a good looking journal. If you were to print it out, or if someone were to try and zoom in on your pages in Adobe PDF, we'd want to make sure that the images still look nice, crisp, and clear. And this is going to be achieved by getting high quality images. The next step is to organize all of those images and the other files you need to make your journal into a logical way. That way you don't lose files and you don't waste time looking for something that you thought you put somewhere and it turns out it ended up somewhere else. The third step is going to be creating your journal in InDesign. We're going to take a look at some of the basic tools like adding text, adding an image, and adding an object so that you can get started on actually making your journal in InDesign. The last step we're going to look at is how to export your journal into a PDF document after you've finished all your work. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the actual design history journal I created, the cover and the bibliography, to give you an idea of what you'll end up with when you finish, and also how I was able to meet the requirements of the project. So first, let's take a look at the journal. I've placed high quality images in my journal, and I also have a consistent layout. As I'm scrolling through these pages, you can see that there is a consistency to how I placed all my information. Sometimes the images were taller in portrait mode or a little bit shorter in landscape mode, but I was still consistent in how I placed my headline and how I placed my bottom image and how I placed my design characteristics. So this gives you a basic idea of what I did for my journal. One thing that you want to keep in mind is the name of the style era, in this case Victorian era, or arts and crafts. We want to make sure that that's prominent and at the top of the page or somewhere else where it makes sense and people can see, okay, this is what the page is all about. Next, we want to have all of our design characteristics. The design characteristics for the Victorian era are chromolithography, naturalistic renderings, decorative type, lots of ornament, and ephemera. These are all things that you can see in these images that I've chosen. So one thing you want to keep in mind is find images that are relevant to the design characteristics that are provided to you by your professor. One important note is to copy and paste the text exactly as it's provided to you by your professor. You want to make sure that the way they gave it to you is the way it ends up in your journal. Of course, you can change the typeface. In some cases, if they have subheadings, for example, leaves and flowers, you can see I made it gray and I italicized my type to show that it's different. It's basically a subhead or a secondary thought of stylized natural forms. So many of the stylized natural forms in arts and crafts were leaves and flowers. So this is like a secondary thought of stylized natural forms. So you can format your text however you want. Just make sure that the actual words and spelling are exactly the same as your professor provided them to you. I'm going to be using Google Chrome because I find that it's probably the best browser for both PCs and Macs. And I'll show you why. It has an extra special feature that we can use when searching for our images. So the first rule when searching for your images is do not search by the name of the art style that you're working on. So if we're working on creating a page for surrealism, we don't want to search for surrealism, and I'll show you why right now. When we click on images, we're going to see quite a few different surrealist images. This one, for example, could actually be used in your journal. I actually ended up using this one in my design history journal. However, you're also going to get results that shouldn't show up in your journal. For example, this image right here, while it definitely is surrealistic, it says copyright 2013. This gentleman is not a prominent painter or artist from the surrealist period. What he did is he created a surrealist image, but it's not something that we can use in our design history journal. After all, it is a history journal, so something like this would not be appropriate to include. Instead, what you should search for is a name of a prominent artist from that art style. So, who better to search for than Salvador Dali for the Surrealism period? What I liked doing when I was working on the project is actually looking at the Wikipedia page for the artist, because in many cases they included a famous piece of art that they created. So in this case, The Persistence of Memory is a really famous piece of art by Dali. And when we click on it, however, we're going to see that we can't use this image. It's 368 by 271 pixels. That's tiny, and we can't use it. So you can see here, if I were to try and zoom in on it, it becomes pretty pixelated. This is not good. This is not what we want. However, I'm going to show you right now why I choose to work in Google Chrome. When I right click on a PC or command click on a Mac, you'll see that you can click on this little section right here in the menu that says search Google for this image. That's pretty useful because what Google will do is it'll actually search for images based off of the image that you looked at. Now you can click on find other sizes of this image. I'm going to select large because again, we want to find the largest image possible. So now that I did that, I found an image. I'm going to click view image, and you can see here that we've got a pretty decent sized image based on this search method. So that was pretty easy. That didn't take too long. If you want to find other images, just type in the name of the art piece, click on search, go to images, and the way that you can select what kind of images you want to take a look at is by using the search tools option in Google. Click on search tools, click on size, then larger than. I typically choose 4 megapixels because this will give us a nice big image. As you can see here, we found an even bigger image. In this case, it's 3000 by 2289 pixels. That's really big. And this is something that we'd want to use in our journal. You can see that there's dots here and there, but that's actually part of the canvas. That's not pixelation. So let's go ahead. I'm going to right click or command click on a Mac, choose save image as, and then I'm going to navigate over to the folder where I've saved all of my images for the design history journal. And right now you're getting a sneak peek of our next section, which is going to be how to organize all of your content. So by the time you finish your design history journal, you're going to have dozens and dozens of images. How do we keep it all organized? Well, the way I like to do it is I like to have a folder within my documents specifically for schoolwork. Then I divide everything up by semester. Then I take a look at how many classes I have and I create a folder for each class. Within each class folder, I have a folder for each one of my assignments or projects. Since we only had one major assignment for design history, I've only got this one folder for my project. Now, within that folder, there are even more folders, and I'll show you why right now. One really important folder is your final product folder. I created this folder so that I would have only the 3 files that I submitted to my professor when the project was due. This way you can make sure that you don't submit the wrong file. These 2 folders for assets basically contain all the files that I used to make my design history journal. If we were to take a look at that document, you'd see that your professor will actually spell out each one of the style characteristics you need to include in your journal. So as you can see, Victorian era, arts and crafts, ukiyo-e, each one of these styles is included, and each one of these style characteristics is also included in there. So you really just have to right click, copy, and paste when you're creating your design journal. So I have another folder for my spread drafts. Every time I met with my professor, I saved a new draft with the changes that were given to me, all the suggestions, the comments, all of that I took it into consideration, and I saved a new draft every time after we met. So that way you have a timeline of the work that you've done, how your journal has progressed. The last but probably most important folder of them all is your style assets folder. In here, I have a folder for each one of the art styles, going from Art Deco all the way to Vienna Secession, because within each one of these folders, I have the images I included on that page. So that gives you an idea of what you need to do to organize all of your content. If you didn't do it like this, you would have dozens of files all in one folder and it would be a jumbled mess. We don't want that. We want to save time, and we do that by being organized. Next thing we're going to look at is how to actually move around InDesign. To zoom in and out easily like I've been doing, you can hit the Alt button on your keyboard or Option on a Mac and scroll up and down if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse. This is a really easy way to zoom in and out. Another option is to hit Control minus or plus, Command if you're using a Mac. This is another quick way to zoom in and out. To move through the document quickly, you can hit the space bar, click and drag, and you'll see that you can move sideways, you can move up and down, you can move diagonally, you can move in any direction. And this will make it really easy to navigate around your document, especially if you're zoomed in and you don't want to move your mouse all the way to the edge of the screen to use the scroll bar. This is a really handy way to move around and take a look at your document. So let's look at some of the basic tools to actually create your design history journal. We're going to start out with the text or type tool. What I'm going to do is, after I've selected this tool, I'm going to click and drag to make a rectangle. Let's continue using surrealism as our example. So I typed in surrealism and I just hit Control A or Command A on a Mac. This will select all of the text in your text box. For a headline, this type is way too small, so I'm going to bring up the point size. Now you can see that it's quite large and it would work well as a headline. So that basically gives you an idea of how you can create text and you can move it around anywhere you want on the page. I suggest using the bounding box as your guide, but you can go outside the bounding box if you like. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the spell check option. When you're using your text tool, you'll notice that if you misspell a word, just like in Microsoft Word, it will underline that misspelled word in red. If you right click or command click on a Mac, you'll see a list of possible options and you can go ahead and choose the correct one. One other thing we want to take a look at is how to import an image. If you're using a PC, it's pretty simple. You can go ahead, find your image that you want to use. And again, since we've organized everything logically, this is a pretty easy process. Now you can go ahead and just drag it into your document, click, and there's the image. However, there's another way to do this as well. You can go to File and Place, and then search for your image. You can see my cursor change. There's a thumbnail of the image, and when I click, there it is. Another keyboard shortcut for this is Control D or Command D on a Mac. It's the same thing as going up to the File menu and clicking on Place. So now that I have my image in here, since it's so big, you'll see that it looks pixelated, and it's also covering almost the entire spread. That's not what we need. So we're going to zoom out, we're going to click on the image, and now you can see this blue bounding box that shows you the edges of the image. I'm going to hit Control Shift and click or Command Shift and click if I'm on a Mac. And what you want to do is you want to hold those keys down on your keyboard and click and drag so that you can size your image down. Basically, when you import a large image, InDesign is going to import it at its full size. And now that we've scaled it down, you can see that even though we're zooming in, it's not showing up pixelated because it's such a large image. The other thing to keep in mind is that there's two different boxes when you're dealing with images. First, you have this blue bounding box on the side. Inside, if you were to double click on the image, you'd have an orange bounding box that actually controls the dimensions of the image itself. We never want to stretch our image like this and skew it. This is unacceptable when you're creating any kind of design project. So keep that in mind. What we want to do is, instead of doing that, if we want to size it down, remember that keyboard shortcut Command Shift and click, or Control Shift and click if you're on a PC, so that you can resize your image. Let's say that there's a part of the image that you want to get rid of. For example, let's say we don't want this text here at the bottom. We can click on our blue bounding box, drag it up, and now we've removed that section of the image that we didn't want. So that gives you a basic idea of how you can handle your images in InDesign. Let's take a look at creating an object. If you wanted to create a rectangle like I did in my design history journal, you can click on the rectangle tool here on the left-hand side of your screen. You can click and drag, and now you'll see that you've created a rectangle. However, when you create it, you'll notice that it's basically just empty white space. That's because we haven't selected a color to fill this box. So we're going to go up here to our color options. And as you can see, there's a couple different colors that are provided to you. Let's say we want to go ahead with a red color. However, let's say that you don't want to use this particular shade of red. To change it up, you can click on New Swatch, double click on the new swatch you just created, and you'll see that this second window comes up. Here you'll have complete control over how your color will appear. You can make it darker, lighter, and you can add or take away the different colors like cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So let's say we want more of like an orange red. So let's go ahead and choose that. We're going to hit OK. And now we've changed the color for our rectangle. Go ahead and select the selection tool. The easiest way to do this is just to hit V on your keyboard. And now you'll see that we are able to move it around again. However, we ran into a problem. It's covering up our text. It's covering up our headline. So how do we change the ordering of layers in InDesign? It's pretty simple. When you find the layer that you want to change the ordering of, right-click on it, go to Arrange, and then click on Send to Back. As you can see, here's the keyboard shortcut for that. On a Mac, you'd press Command Shift and then the left bracket. Now it's been sent to the very back of all the layers on this page. And you can see that it'll show up behind the picture and behind the text. If we wanted to change this, we could always click on this, click on Arrange, and then Bring to Front. Bring Forward will bring it forward only one step. So let's go back, go to Arrange, and then click on Send to Back. The other way you can arrange your layers is to actually go over to the Layers tab, find the layer that you're looking at, and then you can also click and drag, and you can rearrange them in the list. That is essentially the same thing as right-clicking and clicking on Send to Back or Bring to Front, however you choose to do it. Great, so we've started to create our surrealism page. However, you'll eventually get tired of seeing all these blue boxes and the pink and purple. It gets pretty distracting when you're working. So I've got a tip to get rid of all of this. First off, to disable viewing the bounding box of your page, you can click Control on a PC or Command on a Mac and the semicolon button, and you'll see that they disappeared and they're no longer showing up on our screen. The other thing you can do to get rid of these other boxes surrounding your text and your rectangle and your image is to go up to View and click on Overprint Preview. You'll notice that this gives you a nice clean workspace and you can really concentrate on where you want to place all of your boxes and your images. One other thing I want to cover is the use of align tools. InDesign has quite a few align tools that help us make sure that everything's lined up just the way we wanted. As you can see, I've got a pink line right now going through my text box, which is telling me that I have vertically aligned it in the middle. If I were to move it over a little bit, I now have a another line that shows up which tells me it's in the horizontal center. So if I were to let go, this box, not the text itself, but the box that the text is aligned in the perfect center of this page. Let's say we wanted to align it perfectly in the center of our rectangle. We've got a green line going through the middle of the rectangle showing us that it is in the perfect center of the rectangle. Now you can see more or less this is evenly spaced from top to bottom. If we wanted to line up the left corner of our image with the left corner of the rectangle, we could also do that. We just need to bring our image over, and now you can see we have a green line that's helping us line it up. Let's say we wanted to have our image a little closer to the bottom of the page. As you can see, I'm just gently bringing my mouse down. And you might lose the green line a couple of times, but that's okay. Just move your mouse back so that you find that line again so that you can make sure that everything's still lined up. Now, let's take a look at actually saving our InDesign project. So the first option for saving is to go to the File menu and click Save. Now you'll see that we can go ahead and save this as an example file. And right now, everything is saved in the .indd file format. That's our InDesign project file. So when I make a change, you'll notice that there's a little asterisk that appears here, a little star. That tells me that I've got a change that I didn't save. So when I hit Control S or Command S, you'll see that that star disappears, and now I know that my project has been saved. Now that I made another change, you can see the asterisk came again. So every time you make a change, this little star is going to show up, reminding you to save your project. The last step in this tutorial is to export your PDF document. So we're going to go ahead and select File and Export. You could also choose Command E or Control E as a keyboard shortcut. I highly recommend using the following method to name your journal. I would name it your last name and then underscore style journal and then the number of the draft that you are working on. If it's the final version that you're going to submit, you can just simply call it your last name and then style journal. In my case, what I did is I did alum underscore design history underscore bibliography. So I basically called it what it was. So now you can go ahead and hit save. And if you want to have a smaller file size, if you find when you save it the first time around it's too big, maybe change the image quality to medium. If you're only submitting this for online viewing by your professor, that's acceptable. However, if you were going to print it out, you would probably want to choose maximum. So go ahead, click export, and after a few seconds, you'll see that your PDF file has been created. So let's go back to our folder where we have been saving our PDF files. And now you can see that here is the file we just created. And basically, how it looked in InDesign is how it looks here in the PDF document. So that basically wraps up everything I have to say about InDesign and creating your graphic design history journal. Make sure that you search for content the way we talked about, making sure that you only find high resolution images from the actual time period that's relevant to your project. Make sure that you organize all your content logically. As you saw, I have one folder per art style. I don't have all my images bunched up into one folder. Make sure that when you're creating your project in InDesign, you use some of the keyboard shortcuts for moving around and zooming in and zooming out because they'll really help you save time. Also, remember to use the tools like Overprint Preview to get rid of the annoying bounding boxes. Well, that wraps up our tutorial for how to create your graphic design history journal. If you want additional tips and tricks on InDesign and using some of its basic or more advanced features, visit YouTube. There are plenty of free and great tutorials that can help you further your knowledge and understanding of InDesign. Also, City College has great staff that can help you out, so if you have any questions, refer them to your professor and they'll know how to help you. Well, good luck on your project and thanks for watching.